To save her mother's life, Ifeoma makes a desperate sacrifice with a billionaire. But as the deal turns into something deeper, she must decide, can she escape the price of love, or will it cost her everything? A powerful journey of survival, love, and self-discovery. Before we dive into this unforgettable tale, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join the Luxury Tales by SK family. Subscribe now, and let's begin this incredible journey together. Ifeoma stared at the check in her hand, the weight of it too heavy for her to hold steady. The amount was astronomical, enough to save her mother's life, a life that was slipping away every day from a disease that had no cure in sight. Her mother, Chica, was on the brink of death, and the doctors had warned that only an expensive treatment could save her. The hospital bills were beyond anything Ifeoma could afford, and she had already sold everything she could sell. That night, the call came. The man on the other end of the line, his voice smooth and unwavering, introduced himself as Jide Alabi, a billionaire businessman with a reputation as cold as the wealth he'd amassed. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I can help you," he said, his words precise, leaving no room for refusal. "One night, Ifeoma, that's all it will take to save her. One night, and I'll make sure your mother gets the treatment she needs." A sickening thought crawled into Ifeoma's mind. She knew what he meant. She had heard the whispers about Jide, the man who used his money to get anything he wanted. It wasn't a question of if she would go, but whether she could live with herself afterward. Ifeoma spent the next few days in a daze, unable to shake the weight of the phone call. Jide Alabi's offer was still fresh in her mind, his words echoing in her ears. She had never imagined that she'd find herself in such a desperate situation, but now it was the only choice left. Her mother's condition worsened by the day, and the money for the treatment seemed further out of reach. The next night, Ifeoma found herself standing at the entrance of a luxurious penthouse building in the heart of the city. Her heart pounded against her chest as she stared up at the sleek glass structure, its towering silhouette reflecting the evening lights like a fortress of wealth and power. She couldn't help but feel small in its shadow. Jide had arranged everything, an invitation, a car to pick her up, even a time. The secrecy of it all sent a chill through her spine. She couldn't quite wrap her head around the idea that she was about to walk into the world of someone so powerful, so untouchable, just to save her mother. Was this really her reality now? Was this truly the price of love? The elevator ride up to the penthouse felt like it took forever. Every second stretched into eternity as her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Was she making a mistake? Could she really go through with it? A part of her wanted to turn around and run, to walk away from this madness, but then her mother's face flashed in her mind, pale, frail, and vulnerable in the hospital bed. She couldn't let her die. Not like this. The doors of the elevator slid open, and she stepped into a world that was as dazzling as it was intimidating. The penthouse was like nothing she had ever seen before. An ocean of white marble floors, gleaming chandeliers, and walls adorned with priceless art. It was a space that radiated an air of both refinement and cold detachment. Everything about it screamed power, and yet it felt empty, lonely. Jide was standing by the large windows that overlooked the city, his tall figure framed by the skyline. When he turned to face her, his expression was unreadable, yet his eyes, dark and intense, held a gaze that made her feel as though he could see straight through her. "Welcome, Ifeoma," he said, his voice low and smooth. There was no warmth in his tone, only the calm authority of a man used to getting what he wanted. "I trust you're ready to keep your end of the bargain?" Ifeoma nodded, though her throat felt tight. She couldn't find the words to speak. What did she even say to a man like him? Jide studied her for a moment, as if weighing her every move, before he finally spoke again. "You've made the right decision. Your mother's treatment will be arranged immediately. I'll see to it that everything is taken care of." She felt a sense of relief wash over her, but it was short-lived. The weight of what she was about to do settled on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. This was a decision she would never be able to take back. Jide stepped closer, his presence imposing. He was tall, strikingly handsome, and exuded a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Despite the luxury around them, Afioma felt herself shrinking beneath his gaze. She could almost hear the thoughts swirling in her head, all the questions she was too afraid to ask. But before she could speak, Gidi's voice interrupted her. "I've done this before, Afioma. You don't have to worry about anything. Just trust me." Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't know if it was the way he said it or the power in his voice, but it made her feel as though she was a mere pawn in a game she didn't fully understand. Still, her mother's life was at stake. She had no choice. Jide took a step back, motioning toward the sofa. "Make yourself comfortable. It's going to be a long night." As she moved to sit, Afioma couldn't shake the unsettling feeling in the pit of her stomach. This wasn't just a transaction. It was a turning point in her life. Whatever happened next would change everything, and she had no idea if she was ready for it. The night wore on, stretching long and painfully in Ifeoma's mind. She sat on the plush sofa in Jide's penthouse, the quiet hum of the city below filling the stillness between them. The offer had been made, and everything seemed to be in place. Her mother's treatment was promised, but Ifeoma couldn't shake the rising discomfort within her. Jide Alabi was a man who commanded respect, even fear. There was no denying the power he held in this world. The way he spoke, the way he moved, it was as if the world was his to control. His wealth, his influence, all of it could make him untouchable. But sitting here now, Ifeoma realized that all the money in the world couldn't remove the feeling that she was about to make a mistake. Jide had excused himself briefly, his deep voice lingering in the space even after he left. She couldn't help but wonder why he had chosen her. Why not someone else, someone more experienced in these kinds of arrangements? Why her? It wasn't like she was unfamiliar with the rumors. The whispers about Jide had traveled through the city long before she ever met him. He was known to be ruthless, a man who got what he wanted and didn't care about the consequences. It wasn't a surprise that he'd offer a deal like this, but for Ifeoma, the price felt too high. Her thoughts were interrupted as Jide returned with 2 glasses of wine, a bottle of the finest red in hand. He walked toward her with a grace that was both inviting and commanding, setting 1 glass in front of her before sitting down across from her. His presence was magnetic, his gaze steady and unwavering. "To new beginnings," he said with a small smile, raising his glass. His voice held a quiet power that made it hard to resist. Ifeoma hesitated, staring at the wine. The glistening liquid was so deep, so rich in color, but it did nothing to ease the tension in her chest. The weight of her choice sat heavy within her. "I'm not here to judge you, Ifeoma," Jide continued, sensing her hesitation. "You've made your decision. There's no turning back now." The words stung, sharper than any dagger. The realization hit her that this wasn't a negotiation. She had already entered a realm where everything was decided for her. What had started as a way to save her mother had now become something far more complicated. She wasn't just giving her body to this man for one night. She was surrendering her sense of control, her dignity, and the future she'd imagined for herself. "You're right," Ifeoma whispered, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "There's no turning back now." But the words felt hollow as they left her lips. She wasn't so sure anymore. She had no control over what would happen next, no way of knowing how this would change her. The darkness of the penthouse, the quiet stillness, made it feel like she was sinking into a place from which she couldn't escape. Jide set down his glass and leaned forward, his voice softening. "I won't make you do anything you're not comfortable with, Ifeoma, but I can't help you unless you let go of your hesitation. You have to trust me." Trust. The word gnawed at her. Trust was what she'd given her mother's doctors, hoping they would cure her, save her. But now, trusting Jide felt like stepping into an unknown abyss. Would she regret this decision? Was she really helping her mother, or was she allowing herself to become trapped in a web of power and wealth she could never escape from? The silence stretched between them, heavier than ever. The tension was palpable, an invisible wall that neither could break through. Ifeoma felt the urge to flee, to run out of the door, to get away from this moment. But the promise of saving her mother's life kept her rooted to the spot. "I'll do what I need to," she finally said, her voice steady but quiet. "I'll do it for my mother." Jide's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Good," he said simply, his tone cold again. "We both know there's no other choice." The finality of his words hung in the air. Ifeoma knew then that everything had changed. She had already made her decision, but whether it was the right one, she wasn't sure. She had no way of knowing if it would bring the relief she craved or bind her in a way that would haunt her forever. And just like that, the night took on a new weight, one that she would carry for the rest of her life. The hours ticked by slowly, each minute feeling like a lifetime. Ifeoma sat in the grand living room of Jide's penthouse, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. It was as though everything in the room was waiting for the inevitable to happen. Her heart, heavy with regret and confusion, beat erratically in her chest. Jide had excused himself earlier, leaving Ifeoma to sit alone, lost in her thoughts. She wasn't sure what she expected when she walked in. Maybe a sense of control, a sense of clarity, maybe a final moment of peace before everything turned upside down. But all she had was a sinking feeling in her stomach and the suffocating weight of the decision she'd made. She looked at the clock, midnight. The cold city lights outside filtered in through the wide windows, casting shadows that made the penthouse feel even more cavernous, like she was lost in an unfamiliar world. Her thoughts turned to her mother again. Ada, so fragile in the hospital bed. Her mother's face, pale and lined with pain, flashed in her mind. Ifeoma's promise to her mother had always been simple, to save her, no matter what. But now, as she sat in the glittering opulence of Jide's penthouse, she realized the price she was paying for that promise. It was more than just her body, it was her soul. Just then the door opened. Jide stepped back into the room, his presence as commanding as ever. He seemed even more distant now, as if his usual calm had been replaced with something colder, more calculating. His gaze swept over her as he walked toward her, his eyes dark with intent. "I've arranged for your mother's treatment," he said, his voice smooth but edged with something else, something that made Ifeoma's stomach tighten. "Everything will be taken care of. It's all set." The relief that should have come with his words never arrived. Instead, it felt like a trap snapping shut. She had expected to feel grateful, to feel as though her sacrifice had been worth it, but instead she felt empty, hollow, as though something precious had been stolen from her. "I don't want to do this," Ifeoma whispered, her voice shaky despite her attempt to hold herself together. "I didn't come here to be someone's toy." Her words hung in the air, daring him to deny the truth. Jide's expression faltered for a split second, just enough for her to catch a glimpse of something she hadn't expected: remorse. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but it left behind an unsettling question. Was he really the monster she had imagined, or was he just another man lost in a world of power and wealth, unable to escape his own darkness? "I never wanted to hurt you, Ifeoma," he said quietly, sitting beside her. The sincerity in his voice shocked her, but she didn't let herself soften. She couldn't afford to. "But you need to understand something. People like me, we're not used to giving without getting something in return. You agreed to this." "I didn't agree to become a possession," she interrupted sharply, her voice rising with the anger that had been building inside her. "You can't buy me, Jide. Not with your money, not with your promises. I'm not some prize to be won." For the first time, Jide looked genuinely taken aback. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words faltered on his lips. It was as though her words had hit him in a place he hadn't expected, somewhere deep, where the business mogul's armor couldn't shield him. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The silence in the room felt thick, like it was wrapping itself around both of them, holding them captive in a shared space of uncertainty. "I don't want your pity, Jide," Ifeoma said, her voice quieter now. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her emotions. "I wanted to do this for my mother. I thought maybe it was the only way, but now I'm not so sure anymore." Jide's eyes softened as he watched her. "I never meant to make you feel small," he said quietly. "You're not a possession to me, Ifeoma. I care about you." Ifeoma's breath caught in her throat at the unexpected admission. She couldn't understand it, couldn't process it. After everything he had done, after the coldness, the detachment, how could he say that now? I'm not some woman you can just buy off with money, she whispered. You're not saving me, Jeedy. You're just making everything feel more complicated. There it was, the truth that neither of them wanted to face. They were both lost in their own tangled webs of desires, obligations, and mistakes. Iphioma had come here to save her mother, but in the process she had given a piece of herself away that she didn't know how to get back. And as she looked at Jeedy, she realized something else, something that scared her more than anything else. She wasn't sure who she was anymore. The realization hit her like a slap. In the end, neither of them had gotten what they truly wanted. Jeedy, despite his power, was as vulnerable as she was. And she was no longer just a girl trying to save her mother. She was someone lost in the choices she'd made, in the world that Jeedy had invited her into. And now there was no turning back. The days following the emotional confrontation with Jeedy were a blur for Iphioma. Despite the promise of her mother's treatment, she felt more lost than ever. She had arrived at Jeedy's penthouse in desperate need of a solution, clinging to the hope that this sacrifice would be temporary, that the money would fix everything. But now, that same money had entangled her in something deeper, more painful than she could have ever imagined. Her mother, Ada, had begun her treatment the day after she returned from Jeedy's, and for a fleeting moment, Iphioma felt the slightest glimmer of relief. The medical bills were being covered, the doctors were optimistic, and Ada's condition was improving. Yet the victory felt hollow. The cost of her mother's recovery weighed heavily on Iphioma's soul, like an invisible chain that bound her to a reality she had never wanted. Every time she looked in the mirror, she couldn't escape the image of herself. The girl who had sold a piece of her dignity for a chance at saving the one person she loved more than anything. She barely recognized the woman she saw in the reflection, haunted by the choices she'd made. Was this really what it took to survive in a world so dominated by power, wealth, and greed? How had she let herself fall so far? It wasn't just the guilt. It was the growing realization that Jeedy was not what she had believed him to be. Yes, he was rich, powerful, and cold, but there was something else beneath the surface, something she couldn't ignore. Despite everything, despite the transactional nature of their relationship, she found herself thinking about him. His words, his touch, his rare moments of softness, they haunted her when she was alone. Iphioma's life had become a strange mix of relief and turmoil. She would visit her mother daily, watching as Ada grew stronger, but each visit to the hospital seemed to remind her of her own weakness. The weight of what she had done never left her. And every time she thought about Jai, about the promise he had made, she felt a strange twist in her heart. She couldn't figure him out. Was he merely manipulating her, or had something real started to develop between them? One evening, after a particularly draining visit to her mother, Iphioma found herself at a crossroads. She had stopped answering Jeedy's calls, unable to face him, but his persistence had finally worn her down. When her phone rang late that night, she recognized the number immediately. Jide. A heavy sigh escaped her lips, and for a moment she thought about ignoring it. But she couldn't. She had to hear it from him, once and for all. She answered the call. Iphioma, Jeedy's voice came through, smooth yet tense. I need to see you. His words hit her like a punch to the gut. She had avoided him for weeks, trying to hold on to some semblance of control, but she knew deep down that this moment was inevitable. Why? What more could you possibly want from me? Her voice was sharp, though beneath the anger there was a layer of sadness she couldn't hide. The vulnerability she had been trying so hard to suppress broke free. I need you to understand something, Jeedy continued, his voice softer now but still firm. I never wanted to hurt you. I never intended for it to get like this. I don't understand, Jeedy. Iphioma's voice trembled despite herself. You've kept me at arm's length. You've made me feel small, like I was nothing more than a transaction, and now you expect me to believe you care? After everything? There was silence on the other end of the line, the weight of her words hanging between them. And then Jeedy spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm not the monster you think I am, Iphioma, but I don't know how to fix this. I can't undo what's already been done. I can't make it go away. The rawness in his tone caught Iphioma off guard. She had never heard him sound like this before, vulnerable even. Was this the man she had built up in her mind to be heartless? Or was he as broken as she was? "I don't know what you want from me," she whispered, her breath catching. "I'm so lost, Jide. I don't even recognize myself anymore." "You're not lost, Ephioma," he said, his voice resolute, though there was a hint of pain behind it. "You're just caught in a world that doesn't understand you. But I understand, I do." Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. "I don't know if I can believe you. I don't expect you to believe me, but I do expect you to understand that I care. I never wanted to make you feel like this." Ephioma closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the storm of emotions inside her. She had wanted answers, but this wasn't what she had expected. She had hoped for something decisive, for some clear line that separated right from wrong, but there was no such clarity here. There were no easy answers, no simple choices. For a long moment she didn't say anything. She couldn't. "I'm coming to see you," Jide finally said, his tone firm but uncertain. "We need to talk." As the call ended, Ephioma set the phone down and sank into the couch, the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. This was the moment, the turning point. She could no longer run from the mess she had found herself in. The lines had blurred, and now there was no telling where the road would lead. Was it possible to salvage something real from the chaos they had created, or had everything already been tainted beyond repair? All Ephioma knew for sure was that she had reached the edge of a precipice, and whatever happened next would change the course of her life forever. Ephioma stood by the window of her small apartment, watching the rain pour relentlessly outside. The cold, gray clouds mirrored the storm brewing inside her. She had made the decision, one that, despite everything, felt like the only thing she could do now. Her heart was a tangled mess of emotions: guilt, fear, longing, and something she couldn't quite name. The only thing that was certain was that she couldn't go on living in this limbo. The knock on her door came sooner than she expected. It was Jide. As she opened it, his towering figure filled the doorway, his presence as imposing as ever, yet this time there was a softness in his eyes that unsettled her. Gone was the calculated businessman who had walked into her life with promises that felt like chains. Now he was just a man, one who was just as lost as she was. "You came," she said, her voice tight with the emotional weight she could no longer suppress. Jide nodded, stepping inside without a word. He closed the door behind him, his gaze never leaving hers. There was something different in the way he looked at her, something raw, vulnerable, as though the walls between them had crumbled in the wake of their earlier confrontation. "I came because I can't stand the thought of losing you, Ephioma," he said softly, taking a step closer. "I've spent my whole life controlling everything around me, but you've made me realize how little control I actually have. You've made me feel something I didn't know I was capable of feeling." Her chest tightened at his words. The anger, the bitterness, everything she'd felt over the past weeks seemed to dissipate in the face of this raw honesty. She wasn't sure if she could trust him. She wasn't even sure if she could trust herself anymore. But she knew she had to make a choice. She couldn't keep running, couldn't keep pretending that this situation wasn't changing her in ways she wasn't ready to accept. "I don't want your pity, Jide," she said, her voice cracking. "I don't want to be a part of your world, a world that makes me feel small. I don't want to be something you feel obligated to save. I need to save myself. For me. For my mother." The words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment Jide seemed to shrink, as if the weight of her rejection had settled into his bones. But then something changed. He took another step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I never wanted to make you feel that way," Jide replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But I've learned, if nothing else, that I can't fix everything with money. I can't fix my mistakes that way. And I can't fix you, Ephioma, but I want to be there for you. Not as some transaction, but because I care about you." Ephioma's breath caught in her throat, the vulnerability in his words breaking through the walls she had built. He wasn't the monster she had thought him to be. But even so, the question remained. Could she forgive him for what he had represented in her life? Could she forgive herself for what she had allowed? Her gaze shifted to the small table where the check from Jide still lay, a symbol of everything she had given up, everything she had sacrificed for her mother. She had made that choice because she had no other option. But now, standing here, facing Jide, she realized something vital. She had more choices than she had believed. "Jide," she said, her voice steady now, "I'm not going to let my life be defined by one mistake. I won't let it. I'm not your possession, and I'm not anyone's pawn. I'm my own person, and I'm going to fight for myself. Not because you've saved me, but because I've realized I have the strength to save myself." Jide remained silent for a moment, processing her words. His face softened, and he nodded slowly. He had been expecting rejection, expecting her to walk away from him. But instead, she had done something he didn't expect. She had chosen herself. She had chosen her own path, regardless of the dark road she had walked down with him. "I won't try to change you, Ifeoma," he finally said, his voice filled with a quiet reverence. "I'll give you space. You don't owe me anything." In that moment, Ifeoma felt a weight lift from her shoulders, one she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. She had faced the hardest truth about herself. She had been a victim of her circumstances, but she had the power to change her own story. And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly free. "I don't need saving, Jide," she said, her voice firm. "I just need to live. And maybe someday I'll learn how to forgive myself for everything I've done." Jide nodded once more, his eyes filled with something new, respect. He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "If you ever change your mind, Ifeoma, I'll be here." She nodded, but she knew deep down that she didn't need him anymore. She had found the strength to stand on her own, to reclaim the life she had almost lost. And as Jide left, the door closing softly behind him, Ifeoma knew one thing for certain. The true power to change her life had always been in her hands. She had made the choice, and that was the beginning of her transformation. Days passed after Jide left, and the weight that had been pressing on Ifeoma's chest slowly began to lift. Her mother, Ada, was getting stronger every day, and though the journey to healing was far from over, Ifeoma knew one thing for sure. She had taken the first step toward healing herself. The nights that followed were quiet, peaceful even, in a way she hadn't experienced in weeks. Ifeoma spent her evenings by her mother's bedside, reading to her, keeping her company, and letting the love between them heal the scars that had formed over the years. Ada's recovery was a testament to Ifeoma's sacrifice, but now it was her turn to focus on herself, on rebuilding the pieces of her life that had shattered in the wake of her decisions. One evening, after a long day of taking care of her mother, Ifeoma sat in her small living room, staring out the window at the city lights twinkling in the distance. She had come so far from the woman who had walked into Jide's penthouse months ago. The desperation, the fear, the uncertainty, they all seemed like distant memories now, replaced by a quiet resolve. The woman who had once felt powerless had discovered the strength that lay within her all along. She hadn't heard from Jide since their last conversation, and that was exactly what she needed. The silence between them gave her the space she needed to process everything. The mistakes, the heartache, the confusion. She didn't need his approval or his presence to move forward. She was finally learning how to stand on her own, free from the weight of expectations and obligations. Her phone buzzed on the table in front of her, interrupting her thoughts. She picked it up and saw a text from her best friend, Clara. "How's your mom? How are you?" Ifeoma smiled and typed back, "Mom's better, much better. I'm getting there." Clara's response came almost immediately. "I'm so proud of you, Ifeoma. You've been through so much, and you've come out stronger. Let's get together soon." The words warmed her heart. It was in moments like this that she realized how much she had taken for granted, the love and support of her friends, her family, the things that truly mattered, not the wealth, the power, or the sacrifices that people made out of desperation, but the real connections, the moments of kindness and care that kept her grounded. As Ifeoma sat there, a sense of calm washed over her. She had found her peace, not in the outcome of her sacrifice, but in her own ability to move forward. She had learned that her worth wasn't defined by her actions or the mistakes she had made, but by her resilience, her strength to rise again, and her refusal to be broken by the weight of her past. She reached for the small notebook she kept on her coffee table. a place where she jotted down her thoughts, hopes, and dreams. Her pen hovered over the blank page for a moment, and then she began to write. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, but I am not my mistakes. I am not defined by what I've done. I am more than that. I am learning to let go of the past and embrace the future. I have my mother, I have my life, and I have my strength. She paused, rereading the words. For the first time in a long time, she felt free. Free from guilt, free from the past, and free to chart her own course. Ifeoma closed the notebook and placed it back on the table, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The storm inside her had finally calmed. The emotional release she had longed for had come, not through any external circumstance, but from within herself. She didn't need Jide's love or approval to feel whole. She had learned to love herself again, to embrace the woman she had become. She stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out at the city below. It was a new chapter. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was hers to shape. And for the first time in a long time, Ifeoma felt ready to face whatever came next. With her mother's recovery and her own healing in progress, Ifeoma knew that this was only the beginning. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be hers to walk, strong, self-assured, and unafraid. She was no longer a prisoner to her past. She was free.